Hey everybody, what's up? It's Booksy. Today is Wednesday, March 23rd. I'm going to be talking about AMC stock. And I am very excited, but also, you always take things with a grain of salt. I mean, even if it's a good thing, you want to have your emotions in check as best as possible. So good to be having fun with AMC again. Definitely feels like the return of the king. Love seeing it break through levels and just not stopping yesterday. I do think that at this point, we need to be leaving the zone north, not south. I think there's a possibility we could come back and fill in some of these liquid gaps, mostly around like that 750 range, 1750 range. I'm sorry. And that's a possibility maybe for the end of the week, depending on what happens in the options chain and how our lovely market makers deal with that. Yeah, that's some big volume pushing right there. That's great. But that being said, there is some price targets that we want to surpass. So we just passed one, which is this 1940 range. We want to get up to this $21. I believe it's actually it's like just over 21. That's kind of the main one because it's the top of the range. I would expect there to be a bit of a shelf here. If you check out the liquid in this range, it's pretty light in this region right here. This like pocket from about this 1940 level up to about 21. This is where you want to form like your SOS, so to speak, getting ready to break out. So I do expect some sideways. Don't think it's going to go straight up. If it did, cool. Let's get out of here. On the macro, I'm looking at this as the next possible range, which is basically like 30. I want to say it's like 36 to 21. I think that would be the way we would probably go through it. So how are you going to know the difference? Well, if you're going to the moon, okay, you're probably going to make pit stops on the way up and like really fill in these things. Okay, and then it's going to push through regions that it doesn't care about. But if it just goes like straight up, and starts going crazy vertical, and we don't get a lot of pit stops, I actually think, I know you're thinking is like, well, that's what happened here. Exactly, right? You push up through the range and then you explore down through it, the liquidity. And I believe that based on what I've seen with some of these rules, that this would be the next pit stop. Like basically right here would be the stop, the topping point. It's essentially like this hook line, all right there. Now, could it bust through it? Yes. And in a breakout scenario, if this were like the final segment of, and it could be, again, if I'm off at all, left or right on the sequencing, it could be very different than what I'm saying. Based on what I've seen, I think on the super macro, we're basically in, where is that chart? This region right here. Okay, and I talked about this in a previous video, but I actually think we're right there. All right, now that makes it look really darn convincing. But that's actually what I think. I think this is basically from here up to about here is sort of January. And then sort of, this really should be more like this region. But it's kind of like confusing because I think these kind of pair together here. But I actually think this is meant to be like the January region. And then this just, in our case, it overextended and came way back down. So it would have been more like a double top and then a bowl. See that? And then this is like a bridge, okay? And then this is the earlier part on the left side. And this is that first hook. And if you draw, this is one of the hooks, I should say. And if you draw like some lines, I'm not really sure why this is acting so weird today. This looks off. Well, basically you find that if you draw like from the base through that hook line, you can see like the next top, and then same thing here, base through the hook line, you see the next top. Okay, now this one I stretched all the way across, right? But you get the idea. It doesn't need to be there. It could just be here. Let's just keep the rules simple, shall we? All right, base to hook line. So what would that mean for AMC? Well, our base is weird. So there is this upward momentum here, and you might be tempted to say like, well, that's the line, Booksy, and it could be. I'm not certain, but there's also this problem that occurs is that there's not more than one touch here. You see how this doesn't come down till it passes through. So I actually think this line is not the baseline. I think this line is like that hook line. And so I think this points to our top being like right around that $38, maybe a little higher depending on how drawn out this is. But I'm imagining more or less like that 36 range. And I think after that point, much like here, you kind of come back through that range. I don't think that, unlike this scenario, I don't think you're going to pass through this region again. First of all, that would take a really long time. I'm talking about like almost another 7 months. And based on the speed that this is going at this point, I'd say it's been pretty fast on the whole. Yeah, like this could take a while, but I do think that probably they're going to explore the liquid in this zone. Again, from like roughly 28 down to 21. And then I think that's going to be probably about it. So I'm looking for a push up and then a pullback, ideally. Okay. Oh, look, we're passing. We're getting almost up to 21. It's great. I presented this on Twitter. It's just another way of looking at the same things. Basically, every time it comes through, it doesn't break out. But when it doesn't pass through, it creates it, it turns back into a support. It moves, and that's exactly what's happening here, which is good. So this is just another way of visualizing the chart action. I also talked about this chart, retiring it. This chart is no longer valid, not because it was wrong. It was probably my favorite chart. It just kind of kept coming back to it. It never proved itself really wrong. I think in the very beginning, up until about the apex here, I was adjusting it quite a bit, and that's okay. That's normal. You don't know exactly what these things look like until they kind of finish out. But yeah, this has definitely been like one of my bread and butter charts, and it respected it to the very end. Came back down, didn't even really touch down on it. I'm pretty sure. I mean, it could have been right there, but yeah, it just kind of left. So I think that's really good, and I'm happy that this chart worked out. This was our blood zone. This was the one that I noticed on that wick way back here on January 25th. That seemed really odd. And I was like, man, I think this is like some kind of weird protected region. And then it ended up being like this center point of mass on the VPVR. Like it ended up being kind of, this like heavily traded zone here. And so that was really neat that we called that out and we saw that happen. Ever since March 4th, my macro view switched a little bit. Believe it or not, and I kind of find this to be a little bit funny, is that even though I was wrong about March 4th, and I had been tracking really well for about a month and a half. It's kind of interesting because even though I was kind of wrong about March 4th, if you look at this arc, this lower arc that I had drawn, and the patterning I had drawn, this was the patterning I had drawn. I drew it up here. And if you look at that patterning, you can move it down and it's like almost exact. And it makes sense because this is what we were expecting to have happen, just up higher. Like if this had pushed up, I think it was like here, right? And it stayed within the realm, this is what you would have expected. But instead it happened lower. This is still something that basically could occur again in a way. Right at around $28, you might get a big pullback to retest 21 before you push up, and then probably gonna then again list back down a bit. But interestingly, this arc, it's pretty correct. I thought it was just wrong. I was getting ready to just come back and be like, all right, I'm done with this. This arc, it doesn't matter anymore. So I'm not going to keep it around. And sure enough, like it's still like respected, which is kind of interesting. And I'm going to keep it. The middle scenario as well is kind of the same arc. The middle scenario is probably more accurate at this point than the bullish. The bullish scenario has us push up all the way to the upper range here, right? And just creates an SOS within essentially this macro view. That would be really cool, but I'm based on some rules with this hook principle, I'm thinking it's only going to come up to here and then come down and then push up. Okay, really fill in this region right here. And spring 4 would be maybe even down here. I'm not sure yet. I had my macro video like almost done. Wow, look at that candle. Holy cow. That's crazy. How much volume is that? Can't see it. It's like 1 million. Right off the gate, 1 million. Good. Lots going on. Very good. So interestingly though, like look at the arc. It still was respected. And it touched down on it. It ended up coinciding with this uptrend. And it almost touched here too. It could be that if this were a position like slightly lower, instead of being kind of in the middle of this, it's like right on it, right under it. You can see that this actually is sort of its own touch point. So yeah, it looks very vertical right now. So maybe this is going to be a bit steeper, you know, hard to say, but definitely not out of the realm of possibility. These arcs are not meant to be, again, perfect. They're just meant to be like guides and help us understand momentum. And certainly this is heavy momentum. Okay. So short term, really looking to break out of 21, probably going to fill in this region a bit right here between 1940 and 21. Long term, looking all the way up to 36, then back down to, I'm probably back down to 21 again. I don't think that, again, it depends on how this moves, but I really don't think it's had enough, the emu's had enough accumulation in these zones. Like I think we're going to stop here for a little while, kind of come out and finish this, finish this on the short term, finish this on the super macro, and then be done. Okay. Not really much else to say about it right now, except that, yeah, I mean, the sentiment that we had, the theory that we had, I believe was correct. There's going to be people who say that I was wrong. But man, let me tell you, this has been a journey for me, and I've always said that it's been cumulative, that the knowledge has been cumulative. Always felt that way. I never felt like I was supposed to be right all the time. Yeah, the only people who put pressure on me to be right all the time were just the people who are, being nasty, or who just think it's always going to be the end of the world, right? Just really pessimistic. And this isn't over until it's over. Like we don't want to say like, oh, it's over now. Like I don't want to be like that guy, because you never know. Like pull back to 1750, fill in this gap region down here a little bit. I don't know. It could end up coming back down in the end to like 1250 if this proves to be like a whole nother sequence. But I just don't see that. And what I've presented about, like my hypothesis about this being all part of this center sequence has essentially become like the way that I've looked at this stock, and it's become correct. Like I didn't invent it, right? I just discovered it. Like, and I think there's other people who are doing equally good work in the AMC community. They're discovering other parts, other facets. It's like a diamond, right? And you can look at it from a bunch of different angles. And the way that I've looked at it is the relational angle, like how the fractal's connected to itself. I ditched like the sequencing a while back when I felt like it wasn't very effective. But this is kind of where I think we are right now, and I'm still working on a macro video. I did it all and then hit pause for a bit. But yeah, I think this was kind of been my thesis for a while for the super macro, and to me that looks pretty darn close to correct. So I believe that we got it right, and we're going to see it sort of finish out this action here. All right. And then on the midterm, it's really just looking at this more like a spring in and of itself, right? So you have, there you go. Yeah, you see that? So very similar, right? But all this stuff over here will probably be a little more compressed. Okay, we'll see. Because this right here is very compressed. It's not over until it's over. So we'll just be patient. We'll see what happens. It could prove that this whole sequence here really is this area, and it didn't include this. If that's the case, then you'd push up and pull back pretty quick, We go up to here, we hit a stopping point right around $22, we come back down. Maybe that is this region here. Maybe that's the SOS, and then we push up. Okay. But I actually do think that, I know that there's been plenty of times where I've on the short term been wrong about things. But man, on the whole, this hypothesis has been proving more and more accurate as time goes on. And I knew that would be the case if I was correct. Because people have been saying for a long time, and not that it's about being right, I know, but people have been saying for a long time that I was wrong and that I needed to prove it and all this other stuff. And it's like, well, look, the micro is the least important of all of this. It just is. It's not that important. It's going to be the macro that proves whether or not you're right or wrong. And so far, the macro has been proving me more right than wrong on the whole, ever since around this region. And I know what you're thinking is like, well, Booksy, if you were wrong from here to here, then you're only been right like half the time. Sure, that's fine. But again, it's cumulative. It's about getting to a place where you're understanding what you're seeing. And I didn't start streaming or talking about AMC till like over here. Okay, I wasn't part of this community for like the first year and a half. I was in the stock since way back, but definitely wasn't a public figure. And I didn't even start posting videos till around here. So yeah, for me to take 6 months or whatever it was, not even 1, 2, 3 months, to just sort of figure out and get my bearings correct, I don't really see that as a bad thing. I think that's just normal. But yeah, I think right now we're kind of just setting up for the bigger move. Probably our spring 3 needs to happen still. And maybe it just did. Maybe this is it right here, right? This downward cascading motion looks very similar. Okay, and maybe that's our spring 3, and we're going to get a little pullback, push up, one more, push up, and then we're going to start the final part of the sequence over here. So anyways, I digress. Didn't mean to go into all that. I love ANY's chart. I think it's a really strong chart, possibility for some really huge long-term gains. It needs to find its ultimately needs to find its bottom and confirm it. ATER, I'm just going to go through these really fast. ATER is just in this gigantic, wedge, and it's starting to break out. You can see it's trying to right here, and I really do think that once it goes, it's going to go. People love to trash on this stock, but look, the OBV on this thing is skyrocketed. Okay, that's called a divergence, right? Look at the difference in these trends, right? And this thing, when it moves, it's accumulated a lot in these lower regions. I think it'll still accumulate a lot from about $9 down to about where we are now as it goes. But ultimately, like, I'm looking at it above 12, like get back above 12. And that's a big run. All right, that's 300%. And then ultimately a markup, if and when that occurs, would take a lot longer than that, but add another 300% to it. MULN, 1929. Let's get we're coming back up. This stock has been kind of a weird one for me. So I was on the sidelines for a bit, and it didn't really pick up steam in the community. Oh yeah, look at that OBV. Shoo-wee! Wow. That went from 300 million to 2 billion. Holy cow. Yeah, I was kind of on the sidelines on this one. Didn't really feel like it's good to chase stuff, but I started looking at it more in terms of like a swing play. And right now I'm kind of just looking at this upward trend, see if it holds. If it holds, this could prove to be a channel right here. And if this is a channel, let me get rid of this. If this is a channel, this pink one, then you're probably going to see, oh, it's gone. This could be like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where you basically come up to like $8 or $9 or something like that. I think there's some targets right here around like 7, 15, which are huge range. But $7 is kind of what I was looking at. That's a possibility only if this proves to be some kind of an upward channel here that's been formed. But there already was a channel that existed. It tried to break out, but it did not hold. You can see like it touched, broke out, did not hold, fell back through, showed a little bit of weakness. It might try again. I'm inclined to think that this right here is similar to this, and that we're going to kind of go a little bit more sideways before we go up again. And this has some really good fib pullbacks already. It's already hit the 382. I do think that if it were to come back down, it could probably hit the 682, maybe the 0.5. So that's a pretty big region right there. And this would be consistent with this. This particular channel line seems to be respected pretty well, right? It broke out over here, but if you were to draw it up on here, you can see that it's actually in like an upper channel. So this momentum arc is no more. I don't need it on there anymore, but you can tell I used this to help guide it. You can see it worked really well. Pushed against, then broke out. All right. This line, not as useful. But again, this was like the competing trend, right? And then, I don't know, it could get recaptured. Maybe I should leave it up there. It's kind of like, could become a new center line. We'll see if it goes parabolic. But I'm really looking at this more in terms of swings. I got like a 12% from like here to here or something. But I want to see if it pulls back down to the 244. If it comes back below this channel, this middle channel, I think it's going to come all the way back and test this bottom one more time, just like it did here. Okay. And that would put us in a situation where you have you basically have a walk up where, again, this could come up to like $9. Now, if this thing starts squeezing, I mean, we just looked at the OBV. This could just be completely shattered, right? But we really want to see if it breaks above this. So I'm going to watch. I'll set some alerts, see if it breaks above this line, see if it continues down, and tries to come for any of these. In terms of the fib extensions, it went a little bit above the 171, or yeah, the 1718. Is that correct? I'm trying to remember which one. No, 1618. I'm sorry. Yeah, it almost went up to the 2. Almost got to 2618, which is pretty huge. So if it did it again, let's just say it went all the way back down, hypothetically, to the 618. Yeah, your price target's right around where I kind of put it. Okay. It could be all the way up to there. And this is like a 270%. This is like 350 or something. So it's already kind of higher. It's already fulfilling some of those requirements. I'm just watching it. Again, I want to see what happens with volume. I want to see if this breaks up and continues above this line. BBIG, I'm not in BBIG, and this is why. Because this is a giant gap. And there are other gaps in this stock when it runs up, but I've never seen a gap this big in BBIG. I went back and looked at the chart, and I was like, I don't know. You can't see it very well. Let me switch over to candles, but it's there. Big gap, you know? And it just makes me nervous. It did not break out of the major wedge. Like, it didn't convincingly break out. You know, it had these down markers, and this is it. Like, this was the run, I think, at least for now. It could come back, fill this gap, then break out. You know, it kind of did this same motion here. Could end up doing, it did it every time, actually. See that swoop? That swoop. I think it's going to do it again. And then if it can break here, that would be a great entry. And then I think this ends up becoming, it could break sooner, but I mean, I guess it could. It just doesn't look convincing to me. I think this gap is just really scary. Down to this 250 floor. That's when I would be looking at entry right around there if it breaks. All right. And then, yeah, like this thing can run really fast. That's kind of the danger of waiting, but 200% or whatever. In a matter of no time at all. All right, CHPT. This is one of my darlings. So this is a kind of an energy stock. It's ChargePoint, so they do like electric charging equipment. So I like the idea of like going to like somebody that's like needed behind the scenes in electric vehicle stuff. So somebody that's going to get contracts with like a bunch of different people. As more electric vehicles come out. And that's what drove me to ChargePoint in terms of fundamental value. And then the chart, big old cat ears, right? Reminded me a lot of AMC. And sure enough, the bottom filled out a lot like 2020. It doesn't look like it at first glance, but it's just very, very like strong movement, lots of buying power. Just really like this chart. I really like the stock. And yeah, at this point, there's no gaps. I think all the gaps have been filled. So it's got this pocket region right here. I could see it kind of coming down and filling this in a bit. But once it gets over like $21, I think that's going to be like the floor. I think it's going to break out. You're waiting. If you feel like you didn't want to get in yet. If it broke out above this downtrend, you're definitely going to see like a pretty decent markup, I think. And it'll be a lot like this. Like it would come up past this range here and then come back down through it. But still, nevertheless, I mean, decent percentage gains, long-term growth. That's what I'm looking at for that. And yeah, I think that's about it. There's a couple others I've been posting about. I just want to look at IWM just for kicks. Yeah, so this one, you could tell it needed to come back down to this gap, fill in this area a bit. Long term, this is actually a trend, this pink line here, a trend that I found, and it seemed to respect it when it finally touched bottom. I was expecting this to pull back, posted about it on Twitter, talked about how this was an ascending wedge. There was actually an ascending wedge within an ascending wedge, and we shouldn't be worried about those kinds of things. I think the pullback to like the 0.5 puts you in an interesting spot. Right now it's sitting right on the line. So that would not be the best, I guess, if we went back through it. It's possible it does, or it could just kind of coast along here. But there might be a little bit, I don't think there's a gap there. Maybe. I'd have to look closer. But yeah, I think that's reasonable. If it came back and retested, that's pretty normal. So would that mean that this is just a big J fake out? Well, I don't think it's the same as this. This one broke out of like another trend, and then it came back and fell. And this one looks like it's doing the same thing, but it's moving outward, right? Broke this one. And I think that it's looking at this region to be explored a little bit. And then, yeah, I think we're ultimately, if we squeeze the market as a whole, going to move up. It doesn't mean it has to, but again, this is a lot like that 2020, and it's got those shrinking iterations here, which you talked about a bit. So, all right, that's all I got for you. I hope you all have a good one, and I will talk to you later.